Hey guys, welcome back to Jess and Reads Romance. I'm Jess, and today I'm going to be talking about the books that I read for the first week of January. Technically, it's not just the first week because long story short, I fell into a book slump this past weekend and I did not want to sit down and talk about books. Even the books that I really enjoyed, I was just so slumpy and I didn't want to talk about it. So we're going to talk about the books that I read up to January 10th, which is today. And yeah, let's get started. The first book I'm going to kick it off with is Daughter of No Worlds by Carissa Broadbent. Technically, I read this book in December. And the reason why I counted it as a January read is a technicality. I did not want it to get left behind in December. And also because I'm going to be reading the next two books anyway, so I just wanted the whole series to be a 2023 read, and I didn't want to stick it on the tail end of like December 30th in the last year. But this is a fantasy romance. It's a trilogy, so it's not done. The story is not done with this character, with this romance, and I'm very excited. I do plan on reading the next two books with Crystal, and it's very, very exciting because Carissa Broadbent, she has been on my radar since Crystal picked up this first book, and she really loved it, and I had a really good feeling that I was going to love it as well, so I was trying to wait until January, but I just couldn't, and so I ended up by picking it up like the last 2 days of December. And this world is so intriguing. I love the heroine, Tasana. She is somebody who has definitely suffered early on in life. She is part of a race that are called Voltanes, and these are magic users, but outwardly they look almost albino. I don't think they have like natural red eyes like what genetically albinoism looks like, you know, here now in the real world, but they have very fair skin. They have bleached white hair. But the thing about it is, Tasana is not a full Valtane. She has splotches of more pigmented skin and she has different colored eyes. So it sets her apart. And also she comes from a family that were oppressed and she was taken as a slave. So for the first, decade and more of her life, she was a slave, and that's where we catch up to her after the prologue, where we see her being captured as a slave, being separated from her family, from her mother. And her mother basically was like, use whatever magic you have to survive. You have a little bit of magic, like use that. The only thing that you need to worry about is surviving, no matter the cost to other people. Like, it's all about you. Her current owner told her that she could buy her freedom, named an astronomical sum for her to buy back her freedom, and she has been working and it's paid off because she finally has enough to buy her freedom. But it doesn't work out that way, right? He doesn't actually want to let her go. Not only does she make him money, but she is his sex slave, and so he doesn't want to give up that power, and he is morally offended that she would want to even leave him. And I love this moment because it's the turning point. She realizes that she got comfortable in this position, and she looked at her master, her owner, as somebody who is more of a friend, maybe wanted her well-being, but it was all a lie. And so she has to choose herself, and she remembers her mom's words, and she commits murder in order to escape. And her goal is to go across the sea and take refuge in the Twin Orders. Her master had a visitor who was of the Twin Orders. They're magic users, and there's two sides of the same coin. It's like the sun and the moon. We have the Voltanes, who are the albino magic users. They're separate. And then we have the Solari, who are just regular magic users, and they do have an affinity for different types of magic, and we learn that later. But all we know is that she knows somebody who is a Voltane over there, who has been a customer at her master's establishment, and always says like, oh, if you would ever get free, like, you can come over here and we can train you and stuff like that. So that's been her goal, and she's near death and she finally makes it there. The problem is she's so old to be trained. She's so much older. You're usually trained as a child, but she's begging to be trained. Her contact over there, he's not there at the moment, and she really has nowhere else to go, and they finally do accept her. But the problem is there's no one to teach her. There's a limited amount of teachers to actually coach you on magic. And she gets paired with this recluse who has retired, and he is so grumpy. He's a reluctant teacher. He doesn't want to teach. At first he refuses. His name is Max. And I absolutely love, like, this heroine, guys, stole my heart because she is a fighter. She has been brought so low so many times, but she absolutely never gives up. Her spirit is never broken beyond repair. She might have moments where she despairs, but she is never truly broken, and she always picks herself back up. She does not let people tell her no. She knows what she wants, and that heroine just sent me, okay? And then we have the, romantic simmering happening in the background, which I love the way that develops. It's going to be, a slow burn. I'm sure that there's going to be more that these characters are going to go through. There was a turning point in this book where I was very content to just let the story take me away. I didn't really have expectations. I didn't know what the goal was beyond Tisana wanting to be trained in this magic, that she could only do parlor tricks as she was a slave. Like, she could make these beautiful butterflies made of light and stuff like that, but there's so much more that you can do with that, and she needs to be trained for that. And that basically was the goal of almost the first half of the book, but then it becomes so much more. The story becomes so big. It becomes something that affects, the world, nations. And I love the way that the author gradually introduced that idea. I think that she gave Tisana the time to breathe and just fight for what she wanted in the beginning, which was to have somebody train her. And then we throw in the wrench that is going to become what I think would be the overarching plot of the rest of the trilogy. And I think that it's so amazing. There's so much to talk about this book, and I can't really go into any more details without being completely spoilery. Max, her teacher, has so much going on in his past that's very slowly unraveled, and I loved the glimpses that we get of his past trauma, what his mindset is right now, what he thinks of Tisana, and I just really love it. I really love it. This book was fantastic. It was 5-star read for me. Beautiful. I mean, this series as a whole has a potential to be like a 6-star series, and I do have very high hopes for it. It was awesome. I just haven't felt like this for a romantic fantasy in a very long time. To me, it's hard to balance that epic fantasy world and satisfying romance. And personally for me, it doesn't need to be super romance heavy for me to be satisfied in a fantasy romance, because I'd rather the author build a really unique, fantastic world that really works for me and have really great characters than try to basically half and half it and make sure that the romance is just as much on the page or more overpowering than the actual story. I don't actually need that in fantasy. I want it. I want romance in my fantasy, and I think that she honestly strikes the perfect balance for me. So yeah, I can't wait to pick up the next book with Crystal. I am listening to these on audio. They're available on AnyPlay. All 3 in this trilogy are available on AnyPlay, which I'm very grateful for. It means that I'm going to be able to listen to them even while I'm in school during the semester. Audiobooks are just so much easier to access for me because of the times that I'm free. It's when I'm in the car or shopping or doing chores around the house. Okay, the next one is The Front Runner by Elsie Silver. This is the 3rd book in her, I forgot the name of the series, something Ranch, right? Gold Rush Ranch. And the hero of this one, I don't want to say he's like a villain, but he definitely has an antagonistic relationship with the first 2 heroines and heroes as well of the first books. Stefan is this very rich guy who wants to make a name for himself in horse racing. He wants to breed these, winners. He's crossed paths with our 2 couples from books 1 and book 2, and they don't like him. But there's this veterinarian who treats all of the animals, all the horses between all of the different ranches, and Dr. Mira kind of has, I don't want to say a soft spot for Stefan, but she definitely doesn't see him as absolutely totally evil, and she is intrigued by him. And I really like the setup for this story because it kind of forces there to be a connection between Stefan and Billy, especially, who's the heroine from book 1. One of Stefan's horses gives birth, and sadly the baby dies, and it's very sad. And then one of Billy's horses gives birth, and the mom dies. So it creates a unique situation. This tragedy creates a unique situation where this baby needs a surrogate mom, to survive, and her enemy has the means to help the baby survive. And Dr. Mira is the person who encourages this. I really like the way that it creates like this forced proximity situation, because Mira's already intrigued by Stefan, but the fact that she has to go check on this horse, that she has to spend a lot of time making sure that baby is okay, that the new mom is not rejecting the baby, it forces them to be together and for her to see like kind of a new side, a softer side to Stefan, because he is so intrigued by this horse. He wants this horse to survive so much, and we get to learn a lot about his past. And Stefan also is the caretaker for a younger sister, which also gives us another aspect to his personality, because he felt so villainous in like book 1 and book 2 that we really needed to see what he was all about, because he gives off like these mafia vibes, you know what I'm saying? He gives off like the mafia vibes kind of. And I really, really love the way that their romance developed. It was so natural. He's kind of sort of blackmails her into going on dates, but then of course he wants her to know that this is real feelings. He's not an asshole. He doesn't want to be an asshole. He wants to be somebody who she would be proud of being with. And I just really liked how that relationship developed, and it was a really great read. So I give this book 4.5 stars. Now I'm not going to go into detail, like great detail about the books that I reread, because I've talked about them already on my channel once or multiple times, but I will let you know what I did reread. So I did read Burn for Me by Alona Andrews. It's one of my favorite urban fantasy romances. It's a trilogy, and the romance isn't completely resolved, not necessarily resolved, but it's a trilogy of the same couple, and I really love them. So it's always going to be a favorite comfort read, 5 stars still. But the next new book that I read was The Lone Wolf's Rejected Mate by Kate C. Wells. This is the 3rd book in her 5 Points Pack series or something like that. And it follows the same rejected mate trope that all 3 books in this series have followed before. I really love the first book in the series. The second book kind of disappointed me, and so I didn't want to come in with high expectations for this book, but I kind of did have it, because we get a hint about this couple in book 1. Mari is this softer, more gentler female, and we do find out that she's secretly mated to Dara. I don't know how you pronounce his name correctly, but she's secretly mated to him. He is a lone wolf that doesn't really live with the pack. He lives in the forest by himself, and he is like this rough, rugged, wears ripped jeans. He has long unkempt hair. He hunts, and he's very solitary, brings meat specifically for her, and that's it. That's all we know about his character, and there's also a huge age gap between them as well. So in this book, in the very beginning, we get a glimpse into how this mating happened. When did it happen? She was quite young, and I loved being in Mari's point of view, because she likes the idea of being mated, right? Everyone wants to find their mate, especially for these particular females, because they don't have family members to look out for them. And in this world of shifters, having a male figure in your life is very important, especially when the pack was ruled by the former alpha. The newer alpha has made great strides to bring them into the modern world and give women more rights. And Mari realizes she's mated to this guy, and he doesn't really speak to her. She's a little bit nervous too, because she's like, oh my God, where will we live? He lives in the woods. Is he gonna come to the pack? Are we gonna have a house now? Like, are we gonna try to meld our lives? And she's very nervous because he's complete and total opposite from her. And the first time that she actually approaches him, because she's like, well, he's not coming to me, so I guess I have to go to him because their heat comes on, okay? So she seeks him out. It doesn't go well. And he's trying to protect her for a certain reason that I don't want to get into great detail for, because it is a spoiler. And I will say that I really like the reason why he felt like he needed to reject her, especially at this time. So I think we have a time jump of about 4 years where they've been mated, but they have not been living as mates. They've been living completely separately. And Mari feels like she wants to move on. So she decides to go on a date with a human male. And this kickstarts a whole slew of events. It was very exciting for me. I really loved the way that this plot played out. There was lots of danger, lots of adventure. You learned about, Mari's strengths and weaknesses, and Dara's reason for pushing her away, his fears, his past trauma. I really loved how it all played out. The one thing that I will say about this book, though, is it ends so abruptly. I feel like this book did not have the time to breathe at the end to wrap it up satisfactorily. So I gave it 4.5 stars instead of a full 5-star, and I feel like it could have been a full 5-star. The first thing that I did after completing this book was I went to Goodreads because I wanted to know the page count. So I saw the page count and I compared it to the first 2 books, and it is the shortest book of the series. I want to say the first book is like 60 pages longer and the second book is like 120 pages longer than this one. And I just don't know if the author, Kate C. Wells, was on a deadline and she just didn't have time to let the third act kind of breathe and let the resolution end satisfactorily. But I just felt like it was so incredibly rushed, and I was very disappointed with that aspect of it. But I wasn't disappointed with the romance and the majority of the book. It was literally just the end. I just felt so surprised that the book was just ending. There was something with the plot that I felt like wasn't resolved for this book, because I do think that she's going to carry on some of it, some of the danger element that was in this book. I think the same people, or the people who are behind this conflict, I think it's going to carry over to the next book, which I'm fine with, but I just feel like it was almost ignored at the end. And then there was something specific. It wasn't really their relationship that I felt didn't need time to breathe. It was something specific to Dara. It was his personal conflict. I don't think that he got enough time to come to terms and accept that part of him, and I wish that Casey Wells did a little bit more. I did read the bonus epilogue scene that she included with her newsletter, and that was really great, and I wish something like that was included in the book. Like, I just felt like it needed a little bit more, and it could have been a 5-star read, but I really did enjoy it. I just didn't think that the ending was plotted out very well. In this next one, so I read Broken Play by Allison Rhyme. This book was recommended to me by Nalika from Liber Lady. She recommended it to me for the 12 Books from 12 Friends challenge, and the way that I approached this challenge is that I was going to pick one of these books each month to read as part of my TBR, just because, you know, the next couple of months my TBR is going to be pretty small. I'm not going to be reading a whole lot. This week doesn't count because I haven't started my semester, but I just felt like it wouldn't be fun if I binged all these books at the beginning of the year. I don't know. I just kind of wanted to savor it. That may change later on. So Nalika begged me to read this one first in January. I was very hesitant about it because I knew that it had cheating in it. And I don't gravitate towards cheating romances. Not to say that I have not read romances with cheating in them that worked for me, because I have in the past. It's just not something that I actively seek out. It's not something that I crave. And I was a little bit nervous. And there's no way that I'm not going to be able to get into spoilers for this book. There's just absolutely no way. So I'm going to give the overall plot of the book, but then I'm going to talk about spoilers, because guys, it did not work for me as a cheating romance at all. I absolutely hated the hero. I absolutely hated him. And he's the person who cheated in the relationship. The first chapter opens with the hero, and I hate calling him that. I really do, because he's a terrible guy. His name's Drew. He's in the NFL, and he's traveling for a football game. And the way that it's written deliberately by the author, because he is in the middle of having sex. He's being blown by this woman, and the author's deliberately making it seem like this is supposed to be his wife that's having sex with him, because he's thinking about his wife, you know? He's thinking about all the things that he wants to give her and all that jazz, thinking dirty things about this woman who's giving him head, and it's not his wife. It's not his wife. And the way that the first chapter ends is his wife walks into this hotel room while he's at an away game. She's not supposed to be there, and walks in on him talking to his mistress, saying how much he enjoyed this and how much more he wants to do with her. Very graphic. And she comes back and she's like rubbing up all on him. She's naked, and his wife walks in and he's freaking out. She immediately turns around and gets in a cab. And by the time he gets his boxers on and he gets downstairs, she's already pulling away in the cab. And the way that this first chapter ends is that he walks back into his room, into the arms of his mistress, and I was pissed immediately by the ending of that first chapter. Because again, humans are imperfect. I'm not saying that a cheating romance can't work for me, but I feel like personally for me, it would be almost easier to accept a hero who had a moment of weakness, who cheated like one time, and didn't have an emotional attachment to another person. And this was not that. This was not that, because the first chapter, it implies that there's more going on with Drew and his mistress. Let me just read the lines that I was just so sad after reading this, because I was like, this hero has to have the best grovel in the world for this book to work for me now. Like, it was just, cheating was already starting off on like a very low bar. Like, you have a steep hill to climb. And then whenever he did this, went back to his mistress, he plummeted. He plummeted to the center of the earth. And I was like, good luck climbing this hill, my guy. Good luck climbing this hill. Okay, so he says his heart's racing. He hangs his head and he makes his way back inside, back to Lorelai, into the arms of a woman who is not my wife, but my relief. A woman I don't love, but I cherish. A woman who has saved me in some ways, yet is also my greatest downfall. And after having read this complete book and knowing the background with this mistress and knowing her as a character, it makes me even more ragey reading this. Like, I just want to know. I just want to know why, Drew. Just want to know why. He's a terrible human. Okay, so we have this hero, Drew, who has cheated and his wife has found out. He immediately wants to work on the situation. He's like, we need to go to therapy. I contacted my coach. My coach got a therapist and he can book us tomorrow. Like, they immediately go to therapy. And she is hurt because she has had a crush on this guy, her husband, since she was young, because her husband is her brother's best friend. They grew up together and she's always had a crush on him, and they've been married for the past 5 years. She thinks this is the love of her life, and she feels incredibly betrayed because he's basically the only man she has ever been with, ever. He was like all of her first, okay? And this is an immense betrayal. And it was kind of hard for me when June immediately was open to the idea of counseling. I think that I would have preferred if she had like a couple of days just to grieve. Like, I just don't feel like he ever let this woman feel. It was more about he wanted to be okay. He wanted them to be okay. He needed to apologize and he can't give her space. And so she feels almost, I feel like he bulldozes her into a lot of things, even though she has her moments to shine. She does have her moments to shine. She does tell him about himself, but his reactions to her in these moments of strength, it ticks me off because I don't understand why June likes this man. His reactions make me think so much less of him. Like, he just, to me, doesn't feel like a great guy at all. So it's hard for me to imagine why she fell in love with him in the first place. So this book does end with their HEA, and I was completely unsatisfied with it. So that's why I gave it 2 stars, and I have lots to talk about in the spoiler section. Okay, for reasons I've already stated, I felt like Drew bulldozed her into a reconciliation, and she does push back a little bit. She gets mad when she finds out the extent of the relationship that he had with Lorelai, who they both know from college. Lorelai was a cheerleader where he was playing college football, and they've hooked up in the past, okay? So Lorelai knows her, and she knows Lorelai. He has been having an affair with Lorelai for the past year, and he claims that it's nothing more than sex. But then later we find out Lorelai is his friend, and he confides a lot in Lorelai. They talk often. And rightfully so, she is very mad because she's like, all these things that you're telling your mistress, you should be telling me, your wife. But he looks at June as this pure Madonna virgin girl. This is his wife. She is above it all. She is above this base sexual need, desire, his kinks. She is above all of that. And I don't like the way that the Madonna whore thing was kind of used in here. Because Drew likes to spank. He likes, a little bit of bondage, tie up to the headboard. He also likes light breath play, some choking. And that's just too much to ask of his wife. He never asked her if she would be interested in any of these things, but he just knows. He just knows that missionary is the only thing that his wife gets because she's pure, because she is pure, okay? Gag me. I've really hated this, if you can't tell. I really hated this. And the author does try to tie in something that would be like the cause of him hesitating to bring this up to his wife. Apparently when she was in college, she had a stalker, and she had rejected his advances, and the stalker did catch her one night alone and almost kills her. He does try to assault her and doesn't succeed, but he does stab her as well. And this is actually the catalyst for Drew and June getting together. Get this. They never dated. Never dated. He was aware of her crush, but was like, no, I'm just a man whore. I can never do that to my best friend's little sister, even though she's super cute. But then after she gets attacked in college, suddenly he has his epiphany in the hospital, which to me just doesn't seem romantic, because I'm like, well, where is the depth in the love? Because he immediately was just kind of like, hey, we're together now at the hospital. And she was like, okay, because she's been having a crush on him. This girl, childish crush on him forever. And she's like gung-ho for the relationship, and then they get married 2 weeks later in Vegas. So they didn't ever date. But I'm supposed to believe that they are so in love. These people don't know each other, man. They do not know each other. And he has cheated on her for almost their entire relationship, because, you know, he needs to get that sexual satisfaction somewhere, and he can't get it from his wife, so he can't debase her like that. So he has to go seek it somewhere else, like a fucking douchebag. And he goes to sex clubs, and he only like does it like once or twice with some people. I don't care. I literally don't care. Like, I hate him. Okay. So I really don't understand the depth of love that he apparently has for June. And to me, her childish crush just carries over to adulthood, and she doesn't really know her husband. It's the idea of her husband, the man who she thinks Drew is. So the base of their relationship doesn't work for me. And then him wanting her back and her easily falling into what he wants of their reconciliation doesn't work for me, because she even laments the fact that, you know, she's had to move with him. She's moved away from her family, and they're living in this house that she doesn't really like. She has this food blog. She's kind of like a food critic a little bit. I don't know. They really don't go into detail about June's personal interest that much. It's very much a sidelined plot. And she does make a mention of she would love to have a cozier home with character, maybe renovate that. And he's promised that she can do that and possibly make a career out of that, but only after he's done with the NFL. It's just too busy with him being in the NFL right now. So like, his dream first and then hers later. Blech. Anyway, that comes into play later on as manipulation. She eventually gets this job offer. Well, she got the job offer, and that's the reason why she catches him cheating, because she was very excited about this job offer and she went to go tell her husband, and then she catches him in the act. He would have continued to cheat on her for the rest of their lives if she had not found out, just saying. And it just so happens to be a gig that puts her in close proximity to one of his rivals from the NFL. And this person, Noah, has a tie with Lorelai, the mistress, okay? And there was a great misunderstanding when they were all in college. And listen to this. This is why I think so much less of Drew. This is what created the drama between all of them. Lorelai liked Noah. Noah is now working with the heroine June. Lorelai liked Noah. Lorelai wanted to explore kink. Noah was very hesitant, because this kink that Lorelai wanted to explore was very advanced stuff, caning and all that. And he had never done anything like that before. And when he didn't immediately say that he wanted to do it, she was like, well, F you, I'm gonna go hang out with another guy, and sends him pictures and videos of her hanging out with Drew. Noah's jealous because he wants Lorelai for God knows what reason. So he agrees. He's gonna try this kink stuff that she wants to explore, and he ends up by hurting her because he doesn't know what the fuck he's doing, because he hasn't had time to prepare, and Lorelai basically forced him into an uncomfortable situation that he was absolutely not ready for. So she gets physically hurt, he canes her too hard, and she goes cry to Drew, saying that he did it on purpose. So she's a fucking liar. And she also introduces Drew to kink. So that's why he is into light bondage, spanking, and breath play. That's why he's into it. It's because Lorelai, she is literally the root of all evil. She's the problem. But this is his friend. This is the person that he confides to. She's manipulative, and I absolutely have no interest in reading her book, because Noah, who I think is the best part of this book, Noah is the best part of this book, deserves so much more than Lorelai. I wish nobody deserves Lorelai. Nobody does. When June does accept this job offer, she ends up by going to New Orleans, because they're supposed to be doing like some food and wine tasting. I have no idea together. The author ignores that part of the book. It's basically just to get June and Noah working together. And the author's just like, I really don't care what they do. I just need them together. So it's this stupid job that never really pans out, honestly. Nothing ever really gets done. And Noah becomes a therapist that June needs. I feel like Noah is the most empowering person for June. He is the only character in this book that puts June's interests above all else. He's the only person that's about June, because Drew's not about June. Drew is about himself. When June tells him that their sex life has been unsatisfying, and lo and behold, June has all these kinks that she has wanted to explore but never knew how to ask her husband, because he's her only sex partner and he's never allowed them to get kinky in the bedroom. But it's just so convenient that literally everything that he likes to do, she's like, oh wait, those are my kinks. Those are my kinks too. And I just don't like that. Like, I just don't like, it didn't feel organic. It felt like he was getting everything he ever wanted, because June was so easy to say, I want all of these things. Yes, you just never asked me. When she stands up to him, his reaction is, when did you get so mean? And hey, can we drop the attitude here? Like, I don't like this attitude. So he's talking to her like that, and I'm like, you cheated, shut the fuck up. Like, she can have an attitude if she wants, but she wasn't having an attitude. She was telling him about himself, the truth, hard truths that he could not accept. And it just was kind of disgusting the way that he manipulated her into a relationship. I think it wasn't even a month before they were having sex, like he goes down on her, and by the end of 2 months they're like back together, because he does this grand gesture where apparently he had been having this property. It just so happens to be in New Orleans, which is the current city where she's working at. Suspicious to me. He bought these 2 pieces of property. He's like, here's a house that you can renovate, you know, after my career. I always meant for you to have this. I'm like, if you bought this years ago, like, she could have been renovating it this whole time. Why did she have to wait? And then here's a house for your mom and your brother, who still loved him despite him cheating, honestly. Her brother was like mad for like 2 seconds, but then he still talked to him and it made no sense to me. And also your best friend, like, oh, aren't I the greatest? But I'm gonna hand you these divorce papers because I want the ball to be in your court. I want you to be happy. Your happiness is my goal above all else. And here you go. And if we do get divorced, you're gonna get 60% of my salary. And she is like, isn't he the sweetest? Like, he's giving me, what if he wants a family? He's not gonna keep that money so that he can have a family and have babies with like somebody else. Like, he's so selfless. He's so sacrificing. He's doing this for me. And I'm like, no, he just knew that you were never gonna divorce him because he is her childhood crush, and she looks past all of his flaws and just accepts him as he is. And so to me, it felt like manipulation. He bought those properties like after he realized he needed to do something to get her back. So I hated it. Okay. I didn't realize I was going to rant this long about this book because I felt like it was cathartic to actually write a review. I did write a review on Goodreads for this book, which I normally don't do. But apparently I needed to vent about it again, and I'm sorry that it took so long for me to do it. So it was 2 stars, and I don't plan on reading the next one. Then I read a book that I actually liked. Somewhere I'll Find You by Lisa Kleypas. This is the first book in her Capitol Theater series, and it was written like in 96 or something. It's one of the books that I don't actually own. I'm still looking for like an original copy, paperback copy of this book, because I'm a collector of hers and I want all of her originals. So the premise of this one, I will say, is a little bit unbelievable, but I don't care because it was a fun time for me. The heroine, Julia, she wants to be an actress. And there's a scene in the beginning, she's like frolicking, it's like a Mayday kind of like scene. And she sees this beautiful, handsome man, kisses him and stuff. And then a couple years later, she has risen in the acting world and she is a household name. Everybody loves her and she's doing super well in the company that she's with. She had a great opportunity to work with an amazing actor who owns his theater company, and she's been working with him. But she is secretly married. She goes under a stage name, and it is Mrs. And she tells people that she is married, but like some people are like, is she really? Or is she just saying that she's a Mrs., you know? But she is actually married because when she was a baby, her dad, who is of the nobility, signed a contract with this duke who his estate needed money. They had the money and he wanted like the prestige, and they betrothed their kids together and like legally made them married. The big question about all of this is, will this contract hold up for real, for real? So Julia has been an actress. She's run away from home for the past like 4 or 5 years, and she's been an actress. She really doesn't have contact with her family because her father's like disowning her. And her husband, Damon Savage, who is a Marquess, he is actually looking for her because he wants to divorce his wife. He wants to marry for love. He also is very intrigued by this actress that he meets. She's so beautiful, she's so vibrant, and even though he currently has a mistress, he is debating on whether or not this actress should be his new mistress. And the funny thing is, they're married. And she clues in to it very quickly that this is her husband. When she finds out his identity, she knows who he is, but he doesn't know her because she's using a stage name. So the conflict of this is she is aware of their relationship. He is unaware of their relationship, but wants a relationship with her. And she basically has to choose, do I want my life as an actress? Do I want him? Can I have more with him? What's it gonna be? And there's lots of other like smaller conflicts as well in the book. I had a lot of fun with it. I thought it was a good time and definitely very different from the more modern Lisa Kleypas books that we know and love, but I still enjoyed it. It was not a bad book. So I gave that one 4.5 stars. Then I read The Winter of the Witch, the last book in the Winter Night trilogy. I'm so happy that, Crystal and I have talked about how we want to be reading more fantasy, and one of the things that I told her years ago when we first connected on BookTube, I saw that this was a series that she loved, like absolutely loved. And I was like, hey, I read the first book in that series and I love that one. I've always wanted to finish out the trilogy, but when I picked it up, only one book was out because I picked it up like the year that The Bear and the Nightingale came out. So as we were talking about how we wanted to explore more fantasies, we got on the subject of, me rereading The Bear and the Nightingale and finishing the series. So we decided to do a buddy read, and it was so wonderful. I loved having these conversations with Crystal, diving deep into this character, Vasya. This book does have a romantic element in it, but Vasya is the star of the show. She is such a strong character, and I feel like this was one of the most satisfying conclusions to a heroine's journey. And the elements of Russian folklore that are woven into this story are just chef's kiss perfect. I love them so much. I loved the way that the author wrote Vasya's character and her struggle against what a good Russian girl should be and what Vasya needed to be. She could not be that. She could not be this matronly woman that basically gets locked into a tower for the rest of her life and has absolutely no free will. That's not her. That's not her character. That's not who we meet in The Bear and the Nightingale, even though she is just a child and she's fun, vivacious, but she hasn't really been touched by the evils of the world. She's just starting to discover it at the beginning of her story. And then at the end of her story, she feels like such a powerful character. And I really love the power that Catherine Arden let Vasya have. And it felt just so true to the story. It didn't feel like she was quote unquote overpowered. It just felt amazing. And I loved it. And of course I loved the romantic element with Morosko, the frost demon who we meet in the first book. I love the way that their romance develops. And of course I would just eat up more scenes with them together, but I just feel like this was so satisfying. So this was a 5-star read for me. I loved it. It was a great way to kick off 2023 to finally finish with the series and have a satisfying conclusion to both her story and conclusion between Vasya and Morosko as well. So that was wonderful. Then I picked up something totally different, Games at the Orc by Catherine Moon. I knew that this was going to be like a smutty good time. Like it wasn't going to be something deep, but fun. This is the first book in her new series, Monster Smash Agency. And the books that I've read by Catherine Moon so far, they've all been reverse harems. I believe every one of them that I've read by her have been reverse harems, and this is not, but it is like a human and orc pairing. And I'm very intrigued by it because, the past year and a half, orcs have been pretty big. I've seen tons of monster romances involving orcs. So I was like, why not? The heroine, Sunny, she's in a relationship with a human and he wants to spend the rest of his life with her, but then she realizes that she's been settling and she has these fantasies that she's never explored and she's tired of putting them on the side. So she, with the help of her friend who is mated to a werewolf guy, she encourages her to try out Monster Smash Agency, which allows you to play out your fantasy with a monster creature. Because this is a world where humans and monsters are interacting, So it's like an escort agency, but with monsters. And they pair her with somebody who's really good with first timers. So then we meet Kel. Kel is supposed to be playing out this fantasy of an orc, and most people, when they think of orcs, they think of, you know, these big brutes. A lot of people have fantasies about being overpowered by an orc and stuff like that, and so he wants to, you know, break in Sunny gently, but she is so receptive to like everything, and he begins to go off script. And so their romance starts off very sex heavy, and I will say that there was a little bit too much sex for me in the beginning. I started skimming it because I was like, I wanted more to happen. Like it was titillating, it was a fun time, but then I was like, okay, every scene involves something to do with sex. And when Kel realizes that this is his mate and this is like against policy, like you're not supposed to mate with your clients. If you have a mate, you're not gonna, you know, be in this business. You're not gonna be in the sex business anymore once you find a mate. And he doesn't want to scare her off because maybe she just wants to bang and leave him, you know, maybe she just wants this weekend that she paid for and that's it. So that's basically the conflict, and I will say that I enjoyed the second half of the book a lot more, and I thought it was really cute because it's a sweet romance. Like it's a sweet pairing with very smutty sex scenes. I just wish that an emotional connection was woven a little bit better in the beginning and it was a little bit more balanced, you know? So anyway, I thought it was a fun time. I gave it 3.5 stars. It wasn't like my favorite by Catherine Moon, but it was still like a good time. And it's not like I had like super high expectations for this book anyway. Then I decided to pick up All Chained Up by Sophie Jordan. It was available on AnyPlay and I needed an audiobook. And I have it in my like saved titles. I have so many saved titles and I just randomly picked it up. This is a romance between an inmate. He's in jail for murder, but he committed the murder for like a good reason. He and his brother are both in jail for like the same murder. They were involved together in it, avenging their cousin who was assaulted. And the heroine is a nurse who is accepting a job at this prison on a temporary basis. The hero, Knox, is in an altercation, so he's sent to seek medical attention, and she ends up by taking care of him. And later on, he overhears some inmates who are purposely going to lie so that they can get into the med ward so that they can assault Briar, our heroine. So he also gets into the med ward on purpose because he needs to try to stop it. He's up for parole. Hopefully he's gonna get out of prison soon, and the fact that he saves Briar from this situation ups the odds that he's gonna get out, and he does eventually get out. So they do meet on the outside. You know, she's no longer working at the prison. It's only been like a month or so. They just so happen to meet each other organically, like in a convenience store late at night. And what follows is a very sexual relationship. And I wish that there was a little bit more because Knox is basically just scratching an itch. He feels like she's too good for him from the very beginning, and that's basically the whole conflict with him. And she's kind of struggling to reconcile that she is kind of having feelings for a man who society will not accept and not understand why she is falling in love with somebody who is convicted of murder. And I really didn't enjoy the hot and cold of this book at all. I could really feel the author's hand forcing the actions to create some conflict between them. It just didn't feel like it was done in an organic way, and it was a little bit cliche. So I didn't really enjoy this book that much. I only gave it 3 stars. It just was not for me, and I really haven't enjoyed any Sophie Jordan that I picked up. I read like 2 of her historicals maybe, and those didn't work for me either. So I just don't think her writing's for me. I just don't think that it works well. And I think that this is where the book slump started to happen. I read a 3.5, then I read a 3, and then I picked up one of my January TBR books, Where Waves Break by Julia Wolf. I've only read her books under J. Wolf, which is more like new adult, and this one's a little bit more adult. And I was very excited by the premise. I was very excited by the tropes. We had a former rock star who's a single dad. He needs a nanny. He's now a mechanic, and she's had a childhood crush on this rock star. So I was like all in from the description. I started this book off, and this hero just felt too mean for me. He was too much of an asshole. I guess it's supposed to be like a grumpy sunshine situation, and it just didn't work for me because he's filling in with this band. He normally doesn't, you know, tour anymore. He has his quiet life with his son, and he's a mechanic now. He doesn't really do, you know, rock star, the whole thing anymore. But he does, it's a favor for a friend, and he ends up by filling in. And the connection is with like the heroine's sister, who is also in a band. Anyway, long story short, she's already going to be babysitting another 4-year-old boy who is the son of another band member, and so she agrees to be the nanny for the hero's son as well. They've met before, but he basically acts like he's never met her before. Like, he doesn't remember meeting her before at all. The night that he and his son land and are at the house in Barcelona where they will be staying, he is so rude, and I hated this first interaction. He was just such an asshole, and I wanted to punch him. And then the next morning, his son wakes up, goes downstairs, and the heroine starts taking care of the son, entertains him because the dad's still sleeping, feeds him, and he freaks out because he's like, where's my son? Like, oh my God, he wasn't in the bedroom. And then he proceeds to like berate her for feeding his son without consent. And she's like, listen, dude, I'm the nanny. In the contract, like, I looked and I was looking to see if he had any allergies. Like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And he fusses at her, and he's just so rude to her. And I'm just like, it frustrated me to no end because it just felt like he was too overbearing. The author hasn't gotten to the reason why he's this overbearing. I know that there is a reason for this type of behavior, but I feel like the way that the story was laid out, it didn't work. I needed to at least have some glimpse of him being overprotective for a good reason before he actually acted like the asshole that he was acting like. So I was not enjoying it. I was like, I don't know if I can get behind this hero. Like, the kid's really cute, sort of intrigued by the heroine, her backstory. It seems like her and her dad have a horrible relationship, and she's trying to get out of his from under his thumb. And I wanted to like it, but I couldn't, and I was just unwilling to continue, so I ended up by DNFing this book. But I think that this year I'm just unwilling to push myself through books that are probably going to be like a 3-star. Like, I just don't feel the need to waste my time on it. I would have DNF'd the All Chained Up, the Sophie Jordan one, if I wasn't already 75% in. I really debated on DNFing the Sophie Jordan 75% of the way in, but it felt like I was too far into it to DNF. But I won't make that same mistake again because I should have just DNF'd it at 75%. Honestly, I should have just abandoned it. It wasn't worth the ending. It was not worth the ending. So I'm trying to be better about that, just not forcing myself to read books that are just okay or aggravating, honestly. Now, next I reread Daughter of the Forest. I will talk about this just a little bit because it was a buddy read with Crystal. This is her first time reading Daughter of the Forest. It's one of my favorites by Juliette Maurier. She was an author that I read before I got heavy into romance-specific books. I loved fantasy, and I started getting into YA fantasy. I discovered Juliette Maurier because of my aunt, Juliette Crossan. All of her books have a romantic plotline in them, but they're more historical fantasy than anything. They're all slow burns, and I don't think for the majority of romance readers that it would be a satisfying just romance, but it's what I love and what I crave sometimes. So this reread of Daughter of the Forest was absolutely magical. I love the way that Juliette Maurier sets up her characters and has them on this journey. It has light fae elements because this book is set in the Dark Ages, and Christianity is a thing, but a lot of the people are still hanging on to paganism. And I really like the way that Christianity is incorporated in here because there is a character, Father Brian, who is very close to Sorsha when she is a girl. He's a very positive influence on her life, teaches her a lot about, plants and their properties, and she becomes this healer, this renowned healer, and he has a part in her education. He never tries to dissuade her from any of her pagan beliefs. They believe in, the Lady of the Forest and stuff like that. He never tries to dissuade her of it, and they live in harmony, and I really like the way that Juliette Maurier does that. And the highlight for me for this story is a relationship between Sorsha and her 6 older brothers. They have basically raised her, taken care of her, because her father is the Lord of 7 Waters. He's the 7th son of a 7th son. He has 7 children, but Sorsha is the 7th child, and she's a girl. And the wife died giving birth to Sorsha. So he has been grieving for his wife in his own way. He's become a more hardened man. He's tough on his children, and he basically ignores Sorsha. So that leaves her to be raised by her siblings, and they're wonderful. I love the relationship between her and her brothers. You just really felt their closeness, their bond, their love for each other, their protectiveness of each other. And I just, it's delicious. And then one day there is a woman who decides to marry her dad, and she is absolutely no good. She is a sorceress, and the way that Juliette Maurier writes the sorceress character invading their beautiful, almost idyllic lives. It's not super perfect, but she's like turning or trying to turn brother against brother, father against son. She's trying to create discord in this family for reasons which we don't discover in this book, but I love it's the catalyst for so many things that happen, you know, years down the line. And it starts Sorcia on her heroine's journey. And her goal is to find a way to complete this task, this very solitary task of creating these shirts made out of this flower that has barbs. And it's like stinging nettles, and it disfigures her hand. She has to weave thread out of this plant and then sew shirts for her brothers because the sorceress has turned all 6 of her brothers into swans. And twice a year, they're allowed to take their human form and they can visit with Sorcia. She's on the run. She's trying to run away from the sorceress, stay in hiding so she can complete her task, which the Lady of the Forest has given her in order to save her brothers. And she cannot speak this whole time. One of the rules is that you may not speak to anybody. You cannot tell them what your task is. And it's very isolating. It's very, very solitary. And then she meets her hero along this journey. And there's so much going on in this book. It's almost impossible to not dedicate just an entire video to this book, but I just want to say how much I love this book. It was still satisfying for me. I think the first time that I read this book, I might have been 14, and it's still one of my favorites. Still a 5-star read. So anyway, I've been enjoying reading Juliet Marie with Crystal. It's been a blast. And I'm so glad that I have somebody who feels the same way about these like historical fantasy books that are not necessarily romance that I can gush about with, and it's just been very satisfying. I love it. Then I also reread Flawless by Elsie Silver. It recently came out on audio. I got the audio in perfect timing because this past weekend I went to a rodeo. My cousin was riding in that rodeo, and it was just like the perfect time for me to read this book. It was so good. The audiobook was perfection. I loved it. I devoured it. I think I started it in the morning on Saturday. Since it was a reread, I can go a little bit faster in the audio, and I was able to finish it before the rodeo started. So it was just perfect, and I just needed that reread, you know? I needed that familiar, comforting, I know that I'm gonna love this book feeling after reading some duds, and I don't regret listening to the audio. Can't wait for the audio for Heartless. It's gonna be fantastic. I also reread White Hot. This is the second book in the Hidden Legacy series by Ilona Andrews. You can't start Burn for me without reading the rest of the series. So I read White Hot, still fantastic book, loved it, 5 stars. I also reread Wildfire. So I was reading these are my nighttime reads. And a couple of nights this past week and a half I've had insomnia, so I've read a lot more of my nighttime ebook than I normally would have. It normally would have taken me a little bit longer to plow through this series, even though it was a reread. But anyway, love this series. I love Nevada and Rogan. Rogan is still one of my top book boyfriends. And then finally I read Offside by Avery Keelan. I haven't read this author before, and I was feeling book slumpy. I was like, I need to read a new book. I've been doing these rereads. I need a new book, and I saw Tori gave this book 4 stars, 4.5 stars. She gave 4.5. She really liked it, and hockey romance. I've liked hockey romances in the past. Caitlin has kind of kicked off my craving for hockey romance once again, so I was very much on board to start this book. And I really ended up by liking it. I wasn't sure in the beginning because to me it kind of started off just a little bit too cliche. We have the playboy, bad boy, and the hero of this story, Chase Carter. I struggle with the names in this book because Chase Carter is like 2 first names. She calls him Carter a lot of the time. And then her name is Bailey James, and he calls her James a lot. So it's like, there's lots of first name sounding names in here, but that aren't actually the characters' first names. So anyway, Bailey goes to college. Chase Carter goes to a separate college. They're rivals. Her brother plays on the hockey team, and so does her ex-boyfriend. She is in a relationship at the very beginning of this book, but he breaks up with her like on her birthday. The ex-boyfriend is a cliche douchebag ex-boyfriend. And so like the beginning of this book, I was like hesitant because there was a lot of just like caricature characters going on here. The heroine was the type of woman that I don't really like. She was in a relationship with somebody who was so outwardly a douchebag. It's like, how did you ever think you were in love with him? He's awful. And it's a surprise when he breaks up with her and she's like thinking they're going to spend the rest of their lives together. He immediately jumps into a relationship with somebody else, and then she gets hit on at a club by his rival Chase Carter, who doesn't know who she is, but she knows who he is because she's also a sports reporter. She's a journalism major. She likes to report on hockey. She's very interested in that. And he's this cocky, just bro, you know, looking for a piece of ass for the night, and Bailey is in his crosshairs and she just like, oh, I absolutely hate you. And he's like, why? Because he doesn't know that she is feeling that hockey rivalry, you know. As he takes care of her that night because she gets really drunk, he seems like a good guy. He's kind of wearing down her defenses. He's interested in her, and they kind of develop a friendship because her friends are suddenly turning on her now that she's no longer with her douchebag ex-boyfriend, because she's not like a hockey girlfriend anymore, and her friends who she thought were actually her friends are really not. And so they strike up a friendship, which kind of turns into fake dating-ish, and then real dating. And I love the way that developed. It was truly like, I enjoyed it a lot. She has some trust issues because of her douchebag ex, and I love the way that Carter approached gaining her trust. He was very patient, and he was not a douchebag character at all. He was amazing. He was like a wonderful guy. So I just didn't feel, I don't understand why it was necessary to make his character to be this crazy playboy character in the beginning for like 2 seconds if we were going to go this way. But anyway, that's just a personal choice on mine. The only other complaint that I have about this book, and the only reason why this book is 4 stars and not like 4.5 or 5 stars, is we have like the beginning where I kind of would have DNF'd, but I was very curious to see like what the author would bring to the table. I'm glad that I continued on with the book, but this book was so freaking long. This book was long. It could have been edited down. This book was way too long. The story did not require the page time to get its point across, did not require the page time to resolve its conflict. It was just too damn long. But I discovered later on that apparently this book was serialized. It was published chapter by chapter, and the author, I guess, just did not feel the need to edit out any scenes. And I guess if you have like a fan base that read that whole entire story, they want the whole thing, you know, in the end. But I think that pacing is so important when you're actually publishing a full novel. And I think that personally for me as a new reader, I would have preferred if this book was edited and the pacing would have been tighter, and it would have been at least a 4.5 star, if not a 5 star, because I might have been able to overlook the beginning in favor of tighter pacing. So anyway, I really enjoyed the book. Finally, I read Dominate by Pam Godwin. I've been owning the audios for this entire series for a long time because she bundled these books. So there's 9 books in the Deliver series. The first 3 book was a bundle with audio. Same with the second and third. So I have 3 audios that have 3 books each in them. And I had 2 more books until I finished the series. Dominate is book 8. Immediately upon starting the prologue for this book, I was reminded of where book 7 left off, and I was very excited about it because the premise of this book is that, so they're all vigilantes basically. Most of them have a history of sexual assault, the heroes or the heroines of this book, and they're part of this vigilante group. One of the guys is named Tomas, and he had this childhood sweetheart who he wanted to marry, and she died young in a car crash. He'd created like this email account for her, and for the past 10 years, he has been emailing this account of this girl who was dead, basically confessing like all of his feelings. He missed her, and it started off like that, but then once he started getting into his vigilante stuff, he actually started telling this email account everything about this operation. And it's supposed to be a secret, so all of his friends could be in danger. And one day he gets a reply from this email account that nobody should have access to. He gets a reply, and it's like, hey, so I found this email and the password in this coat in a secondhand store that I got this coat from, and I'm sorry I've been reading your emails for like the past 10 years, and I want you to stop what you're doing, because he was about to put himself in danger, basically. And so this girl was like trying to get him to stop putting himself in danger. She didn't want him to die. And so he's like, I gotta find out who this girl is because she knows all of her names. She knows everything that we've done. We could go to prison for like years. and I need to tie up this loose end. So that's the premise of Dominate. Tomas needs to find out who's on the other side of the email, and then it starts off with Riley's backstory. This is also an age gap, and he's 27, and I think she's in her early 40s, so big age gap, and it starts off so good. But I don't think that the connection was written in a way that was satisfying. She's been reading his emails for the past 10 years, so I understand why she feels a connection to Tomas. She knows so much about his life. But there's a theme to this series where the person who's involved with the vigilante group usually tortures or falls in love with somebody who tortures them. Like, this is a very dark series, and I feel like the torture in this situation kind of felt forced. And then the resolution to that also felt a little bit rushed because I felt like they fall in love too suddenly. He definitely falls in love way too easily with this woman because I'm like, you don't know her. She knows you, but you don't know her. So it didn't feel believable. It also felt very short. Like, I finished this audiobook in no time and I was like, wow, it's over already. I don't know. It just was not as well crafted as the rest of the books in the series, and maybe I have high expectations because I feel like she did something so crazy but incredible with the first few books in the series. Like, I will never not love Vanquish. Such a great and terrible dark romance. Take, have no idea how she pulled that off. I know a lot of people don't like Take, but it worked for me. But this one did not work. Dominate did not work for me. It was just kind of meh. It's kind of mediocre. I'm going to give it 3.5 stars. Honestly, it's more of a 3, but it's Pam Godwin, so I am going to be a little bit lenient, but I am being honest about that. But to me, it's a 3-star book. But I'm going to do 3.5 because I love Pam. Okay, that's it. This is going to be one hell of a long weekly wrap-up. But oh well. I like to talk, and it's just going to take me a while to edit, and it'll be fine. I'm crossing my fingers that I can do more like weekly wrap-ups, and if not, maybe mid-month wrap-ups, monthly wrap-ups. I'm hoping that I can do some sort of wrap-up this semester because I didn't really do that last semester, and I just kind of fell off the face of the earth for like 2.5 months, almost 3 months, and I'd like to be a little bit more present. I don't think that I will be making another video for the next 2 weeks as I get into the semester, but we'll see. Thank you for, listening to these rambles because I do feel like I was all over the place and I talked a lot for some of these books, and I'm sorry about that. Usually I'm a little bit more prepared and or aware of the time that I spend on each book, but I just had lots of feelings this week. I had lots of feelings. Anyway, if you like this video, give it a big thumbs up. If you're not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe to get notified on any future videos that I do. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, life's better with little HEA. Bye guys.